The World Meteorological Organization, or the WMO, I'll be referring to this like that throughout the whole video, has just issued a profound warning to humanity. We are standing on a precipice of a massive planetary scale disruption. To understand what's coming to us, we have to understand the invisible machinery that keeps you alive. Imagine walking into the equator. You're not going to do it, or maybe you haven't, but just imagine. Close your eyes, feel the wind on your face. Now, for centuries, mariners call them trade winds. You've probably heard about trade winds. They blow continuously from east to west, from South America across a massive expanse of the Pacific toward Indonesia and Philippines. They are relentless. They are a constant physical force. And because water is a fluid, the wind pushes it. Every second, every day, those winds are scraping the sun-baked, boiling hot surface water from the Pacific Ocean and piling it up in the west. The water level in Indonesia is actually physically higher by about half a meter than it is in Ecuador. Because of all of that warm water is being pushed away, the ocean has to fill the void. So off the coast of South America, the Pacific pulls freezing, nutrient-rich water up from the black abyss. We call it the upwelling. Remember this name. That cold water hits the sunlight. The phytoplankton bloom in the numbers so massive you can see them from the orbit. The fish eat phytoplankton, the birds eat fish, the fishermen pull millions of tons of protein from the sea to feed the globe. It's a perfect, balanced planetary clockwork, but the universe doesn't like perfect balance. There's entropy. Every 2 to 7 years, the pendulum swings. The machinery stutters. We call this stutter El Nino. You hear that phrase on the evening news, and you think this means a rainy winter. You think it means you need to buy a heavier coat, or maybe to pack an umbrella. You are thinking too small. I'm going to make you understand the magnitude of this in this video, and that's the whole point. This is not a weather forecast. This is a fundamental rewriting of the Earth's thermodynamics. When El Nino triggers, it happens in a very specific, terrifying sequence, and there's 4 steps to it. It always starts with the atmosphere. For reasons we're trying to map, the steady, reliable trade winds over the central Pacific begin to falter. Those trade winds I was talking about earlier. They weaken. Sometimes they stop entirely. Sometimes they even reverse direction. The invisible hand pushing the water suddenly just lets go. In step number 2, or stage number 2, which is called the Kelvin wave, without the wind to hold it in place, a massive continent-sized mountain of boiling hot water in the western Pacific collapses. It succumbs to gravity. It sloshes backwards, heading straight for Americas. But it doesn't just travel on the surface. It travels deep underwater as a massive, slow-moving pulse of thermal energy called the Kelvin wave. It moves invisibly, carrying more heat than the entire human species has generated in the history. In stage number 3, the atmospheric coupling happens. As that heat pull moves east, the atmosphere above it begins to boil. The thunderstorms, rising air, the massive cloud formations, they follow the heat. The storm track physically detaches from Asia and marches across the ocean. Hopefully you can see that on this picture here. In stage number 4, the upwelling fails. Finally, the Kelvin wave crashes into the coast of South America. The warm water capsizes the cold water, the upwelling stops, the nutrients vanish. The phytoplankton die, the fish starve, the entire ecosystem of the Eastern Pacific collapses in the matter of weeks. We're not talking about history, we're not talking about a theory, we're talking about right now. Look at the calendar. It's June 2026. If you ask the scientists at the WMO or the forecasters at the Climate Prediction Center, they will not tell you that El Nino might happen. They will tell you that the dominoes are already falling. Over the last few weeks of May and June, the Pacific Ocean has been rapidly transitioning. We track a very specific region in the Central Pacific called Nino 3.4. We draw a box around it and we measure the temperature. The threshold for El Nino is an anomaly of 0.5. Right now, 0.5 Celsius. We just crossed 0.9 degrees and we are climbing really fast. But the surface temperature is only the tip of the sphere, or spear. The real danger is hiding in the dark. Right now, underneath the surface of the Pacific, a massive Kelvin wave is moving eastward. You already know the cycles. The Kelvin wave cycle is going on right now. Buoys anchored in the ocean floor are sending us the data back into the supercomputers. The subsurface heat content is staggering. It's more than twice the energy we saw during the massive El Nino 2023. The heat is so intense that the atmosphere is already reaching, we call it coupling. The satellite data from the first weeks of June 2026, what climatologists are calling is the smoking gun. We're seeing massive columns of rising air over the central and eastern Pacific and sinking air over the Indian Ocean. You can see that right here. The Earth is literally taking a deep breath, shifting its storm tracks in real time. The international models have crunched the numbers. They're giving us a 98% probability that a major El Nino will dominate the rest of 2026 and persist well into 2027. And the models are suggesting that this will not be moderate whatsoever. It could cross the threshold into what's called a super El Nino. Why does a pocket of warm air in the middle of nowhere even matter to you? Because we live in a closed system. When you heat up the Pacific Ocean, you don't just change the ocean. You change the shape of the sky. You change the jet stream. Those high altitude rivers of air that steer the water across the continents, well, they warp, they buckle. And when the jet stream buckles, the global supply chain buckles with it. Here's how the physics of the Pacific translates into the reality of your street. I want to really briefly show you something here. This is what it means. Now, I've mapped the cause and effect here of the ocean anomaly, the global impact it'll have, and why it happens. Let me go over it for you really quickly. The rising air over the Pacific causes a drought in Australia and India. The moisture is sucked away from the Western Pacific, the monsoon fails, and the crops wither. The anomaly of a flattened jet stream causes extreme heat in northern US and Canada. The cold polar air gets locked in the Arctic, leaving the northern latitudes to break under high pressure. The anomaly of wind shear over the Atlantic, that means fewer Atlantic hurricanes, high altitude winds from the Pacific shear that tops off developing storms in the Atlantic, ripping apart before they even form. And finally, the anomaly that's going to happen with Super El Nino, the warm water in the Eastern Pacific causes massive flooding in South Americas. The heat fuels continuous, relentless thunderstorms that drown the coastal deserts of Peru and Chile. Do you see how crazy this thing is? And what's really important is, think about the interconnectedness of all that. A failure of the wind in the middle of a barren ocean causes a drought in India. That drought causes the rice harvest to fail. The failure causes the price of grain to skyrocket in Europe. That price shock destabilizes the whole government. Cause and effect. The WMO is warning us because it's not just a climate event, it's a systemic shock. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. El Nino is a natural cycle. It has been happening for millions of years. The ancient Incas knew about it. They built their entire society around years of rains and when the rains will fall. But the Incas were not dealing with a 2026 baseline. For the last century and a half, human civilization has been running a massive, uncontrolled chemistry experiment on our atmosphere. We have pumped billions of tons of greenhouse gases into the sky. We have trapped heat of the sun. We have warmed the oceans to the highest temperatures ever recorded in the human history. When a super El Nino happens on top of a human-warm planet, it doesn't just add heat, it completely multiplies it. It's like pouring high-octane rocket fuel into a smoldering fire. We're loading the dice. A moderate El Nino 50 years ago caused a bad summer. A moderate El Nino today pushes the global average temperatures past the critical 1.5 degree threshold. It bleaches the coral reefs of the point to the point of extinction. It pushes the Amazon rainforest closer to a savanna. We're taking the Earth's natural flywheel and we're spinning it faster and faster, completely blind to the fact that the bearings are starting to crack. Now, I want you to step back from the charts, step back from the terrifying statistics. This is an informational video. Let's look at what this moment actually represents for us. 100 years ago, a drought or a flood from El Nino was an act of God. It struck at night, it wiped out harvest, and the people have starved, and they had absolutely no idea what happened. They were victims of a chaotic, merciless universe. Today, you can open your phone, open your laptop, and look at the real-time temperature of the water molecules 300 meters below the surface of the ocean, 10,000 miles away. We have supercomputers running billions of calculations per second, mapping the trajectory of a storm that hasn't even formed yet. We have satellites orbiting the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour, reading the height of the ocean surface down to a millimeter. We've figured out the machinery. We've pushed the currents back on the universe. We are not the victims of the dark anymore. We have the data. The WMO is ringing the alarm bell from the highest tower we have ever built. They're telling governments and corporations and humanitarian agencies exactly what is coming. They are telling us to stockpile food. They're telling us to secure our power grids. They're telling us to move people from the flood zones. If a hurricane bearing down on our city, if you have a weak warning, you do not stand on the beach and wait for the water to hit your chest. You board up the windows, you evacuate, because we have the warning. The June 2026 data is conclusive. The pendulum is swinging back. The Pacific Ocean has awakened. If we suffer catastrophic world-altering losses over the next 18 months, it will not be because science had failed us. It will be because we chose to ignore the greatest early warning system of our species that our species has ever constructed. The Earth is breathing. The engine is turning. The only question left is whether we will listen.